just switching to my Devar Torah presence. Well, first I want to say thank you so much to Zevi. Your voice, your presence, it's what a true blessing. You've really lifted my spirit so much higher, and I know everybody else too, so thank you. Saying thank you to Sharon on the chat. I know, Sharon, you're at home tonight, so thank you so much. And thank you to David, who's doing our tech today also, so thank you. And Shabbat Shalom, everybody. So we've reached the end of Breshit. We did it. Started all the way back at Simchat Torah, if you can believe that. I think it was like October 28th, and it took us until about, I don't think that's the right date, October something. October 17th, I think, was Simchat Torah. Anyways, and now it took us all the way until the very beginning of January to be done with the book of Breshit. And as I mentioned last week, we have reached the moment of Yaakov's death. Yaakov has the opportunity now to bless all of his sons, all 12 of his sons. If you come to Saturday morning services tomorrow, we'll go further in depth on these so-called blessings. But tonight I want to focus on something else. I want to focus on a particular blessing, the one that Jacob gives to Efraim and Menashe, Joseph's two sons. Jacob stretches out his hands, and he places them on Ephraim and Menashe's heads, and he says, Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra yivarech et hana'arim veikra bahem shemi v'shem avotai Avraham v'Yitzchak v'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. The angel who redeemed me from all evil should please bless these youths and let them be called by my name together with the names of my fathers Avraham and Yitzchak, and may they be like fish multiplying within the land. Jacob calls upon the angel that he encountered who protected him from harm when he was fleeing from Esau after stealing his birthright, the one that when he dreamt about the angels going up and down on the ladder. He asks that angel of protection for guidance and protection for future generations. He asks that in the future the people of Israel become known by his name, a wish that is fulfilled. And then he blesses over his children with a similar blessing we've heard before, that they become numerous and great in the world. Except this time, instead of using sand or stars, Jacob blesses them with being as numerous as fish in the sea. And I wanted to just, as a brief aside, say one sweet kind of fun explanation I heard for this from the Talmud, which is that there's a belief in sort of superstitious ancient Judaism that the evil eye cannot touch anything that is under the sea. So this is not just a wish for fruitful procreation, but also doubles as a blessing of protection from evil. Don't you love Jewish superstition? Isn't it great? So this blessing has become a sort of lullaby in the Jewish tradition. It's customary to say this pasuk before going to bed, and you can imagine it as kind of a companion to Hashkiveinu. In Hashkiveinu, we ask God to protect us from harms of all kinds, and then in Hamalach Hagoel, we invoke Jacob's blessing for all of his children that we will be guided away from harm like he was, like Abraham was, like Yitzchak was, and like Moses was. So you can see how easily that nighttime prayer that specifically talks about blessing over children could become a lullaby. But there's another blessing that has become a part of Jewish tradition that invokes this same scene. After Jacob gives the lullaby blessing, he says, going forward, when Israel wants to invoke blessings, they will say, Yisameccheinu Elohim ke'Efraim v'che-Menashe. May God make you like Ephraim and Menashe. The place where you may have heard this before in our modern times is during the blessing of the children, which takes place on Friday nights. Just by a quick show of hands, has anyone here had the experience of being blessed when they were a child, or perhaps giving a blessing to their own children? One person in the back, Suzanne. Okay, Glenn. Okay, great. Okay, a few. Okay, Zevi's raising their hand just very slightly. Okay, so some of us have had this experience, not all of us. So I personally didn't grow up with this either, but basically, usually what it is right around Kiddush time, usually before Kiddush, if you have children, you would go over to each child and you would place your hand on them, just exactly like Jacob does with Ephraim and Menashe, and you give them the blessing of, may you be like Ephraim and Menashe, or perhaps may you be like Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, and Leah. And then you say the priestly blessing. Yisameccheinu Elohim ke'Ephraim v'Menashe, Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha. May God bless and protect you. Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha. May God show you favor and be gracious to you. Yisa Adonai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God's face always be turned toward you and grant you peace. So in these small 3 verses from the end of Genesis, we have Jacob's wish and blessing for all his children, and the beginning of the formulation of the way Jews have blessed their future generations. I did a little bit of research on when this blessing of the children came into being. It seems that the way that it is with the priestly blessing is pretty new, probably the 70s or so. Yeah, this is a guess. I mean, the 1970s, not that long ago, but more on that later. But there is allusion to blessing children having to do with Friday night all the way back since the Talmud, and there's talk of particular blessings of the children, although potentially not with this exact formulation, into the 16th century. So the idea is not new, but perhaps this formulation is somewhat new. And these blessings are very beautiful, and thinking about them as Jacob's dying wish is especially meaningful. But there's something about them that doesn't quite sit right with me in saying them in an LGBTQ synagogue. We're a queer community, which means that we acknowledge that not all of us have children, whether by choice or by circumstance. So this is not a tradition that can necessarily be passed down in the way it was intended in the hetero world. However, we are coming up on the 50th anniversary of CBST. As I said, more about the 70s a little bit later. So in February, we will mark 50 years of CBST. And so what I've been thinking a little bit about is legacy. Not necessarily by way of children, but more the question of what do we want to pass on in the world? What do we want to leave the next generation with? What do we as a gay synagogue want to bless the future with? So I thought, here we are on a Friday night. We've lit the candles, the traditional time when the blessing of the children might be said. We're before Kiddush. So why not write a new blessing? A new tradition, a blessing of legacy, a blessing for the future. I will give my attempt now, but obviously what I'm actually curious about is what you all would say. So afterwards you can come and tell me. But first, for a little guidance, let's take a look at the 2 prominent reasons given by commentators as to why Jewish tradition chose Ephraim and Menashe as the 2 figures we are meant to be blessed by. As opposed to, we could have chosen Abraham, Isaac, or Jacob. That would be the normal thing you might think, but instead we say, Yivarechecha Adonai ke Ephraim v'Menashe. So the first reason given is that this is the first pair of brothers in the Torah without any rivalry between them. We've had Isaac and Yitzchak and Yishmael. We've had Jacob and Esav, and of course Joseph and all of his brothers. But there's a way in which we don't want to invoke their relationships in our blessing for ourselves. Instead, we want to invoke loving partnership, companionship, and harmony. The other reason given is that Ephraim and Menashe were the first 2 brothers to be brought up in Egypt, in exile, and yet they maintained their Jewish identity. So when we bless ourselves or others to be like them, we are saying that we bless us to remain true to our inner selves. No matter what is going on around us, to stay true to our Jewishness, no matter where we are in the world, and to know who we are proudly, even if our outside doesn't yet match our inside. I embellished a little bit of that, but it feels right? So in keeping with those themes, here's my attempt at a blessing for future generations. Yisameccheinu Elohim ke'Efraim ve'kemenashe, keRuth ve'Naomi, keYonatan ve'David, ve'Mordechai ve'Esther. May the Lord bless us like Ephraim and Menashe, Ruth and Naomi, Jonathan and David, Mordechai and Esther. May God bless us to be strong in ourselves and our identities, to know who we are even amidst a world that is not always ready for us. May God bless over the loving relationships and connections we have and let them shine out to the world as models of love, companionship, and family without hatred or animosity. May God bless over the work of our hands and our hearts so that our accomplishments and our fight for greater justice for both the LGBTQ community and all communities who know discrimination multiply like stars in the sky and fish in the sea, great in number and free from harm. May God's loving face always be turned toward our community so that future generations know a world that is more gay, more lesbian, more queer, free from fear, and knowing peace. And let us say, Amen. So there we go. That's my attempt. You guys can tell me yours next time.